This video isn't meant to comfort you. It's meant to shake you. You're about to step into the mind of the most dangerous thinker of modern philosophy. Friedrich Nietzsche didn't write to please. He wrote to destroy certainties, crush fragile values, and pull humanity out of its existential cowardice. While the modern world leans on moral, religious, and ideological crutches, Nietzsche picks up a hammer, and with it, he smashes every one of those illusions. God is dead. Truth is just a well-told lie. Morality is an invention of the weak. In this complete guide to Nietzsche's disturbing philosophy, you'll face 20 ideas that tear down everything you were taught to respect. If you've got the courage to keep going, get ready. The journey starts now. And it doesn't promise comfort, only clarity. Raw, unsettling, liberating. Imagine for a moment that everything you were taught to see as virtuous, humility, obedience, compassion, self-sacrifice, isn't actually some noble ideal, but a trap. A strategy created by those who lacked the power, strength, or courage to live boldly. Nietzsche forces us to face this possibility with brutal honesty. For him, traditional morality, the one inherited from religion, society, and customs, doesn't come from human greatness. It comes from resentment, and that's where the discomfort begins. Nietzsche separates morality into two types: master morality and slave morality. Master morality is born from strength, vitality, and inner nobility. Slave morality, on the other hand, is born from weakness, envy, and denial. Master morality says, I'm good because I'm strong, creative, and life-affirming. Slave morality says, he's bad because he's strong, and I'm good because I'm weak. See the twist? This slave morality is what Nietzsche calls the fraud of the weak, a system not built from virtue, but from resentment disguised as holiness. The weak, unable to win in the real world, retreat into morality to turn their weakness into superiority. And that's where the hypocrisy starts. Because the weak don't reject power out of goodness, they reject it because they're incapable of achieving it. Then they dress up their impotence as if it were a noble choice, some kind of spiritual elevation. Nietzsche saw this clearly in traditional Christianity, which he called the morality of pity, a system that glorifies suffering, preaches turning the other cheek, and turns the denial of life into a virtue. For him, this kind of morality was anti-life, a worship of weakness, submission, and guilt. In On the Genealogy of Morals, he writes, "The good were the noble, the powerful, the high-minded. The bad were the weak, the low, the petty. But over time, this order flipped, and those on the bottom, resentful, powerless, humiliated, started setting the moral rules. That's not moral progress, that's symbolic revenge. The weak get back at the strong by building a system where strength looks evil and weakness gets rebranded as sainthood. This flip of values didn't happen with honesty, but with strategy. That's why Nietzsche saw the resentful as dangerous. They don't fight head-on, they corrode from within. They don't lead with courage, they manipulate through guilt. They don't win, they make the winner feel ashamed for winning. And this moral resentment spreads. It becomes law, it becomes religion, it becomes culture. It's in school textbooks, church sermons, fake displays of humility. It's in the belief that seeking greatness is arrogance, that wanting power is sinful, that loving yourself is selfish. But why does this critique hit so hard? Because it forces us to question the foundation of our moral identity. And that hurts. It takes courage to admit that much of what we call virtue might just be fear in disguise. That our humility might not be nobility, but avoidance. That our compassion might hide envy. That our beliefs might come from resentment, not wisdom. Nietzsche isn't saying all moral acts are fake, but he is asking us, does the morality you live by come from your power or your weakness? Does it affirm life or deny it? Does it push you forward or hold you back? And this still matters today. In an age of performative virtue, politically correct outrage, and social media-driven righteousness, Nietzsche's critique is more relevant than ever. How often is morality used not to elevate life, but to control, shame, or silence? How often do people cry justice just to take out their bitterness on the world, demanding everyone bend to their victimhood? Nietzsche wasn't a nihilist, as some claim. He didn't want to destroy all values. He wanted to destroy false ones, so new and real ones could emerge. He believed in a morality born from inner strength, personal creation, and the will to power, not from blindly following inherited rules. And that strength has nothing to do with oppression. For Nietzsche, the strong don't need to dominate others. They're self-sufficient. They're generous because they can be, not because they fear rejection. They're free because they don't need the herd's approval. That's why Nietzsche's critique is a wake-up call, a call to true moral responsibility, a call to self-creation, to leave behind borrowed morality and build an ethic rooted in authenticity and courage. And here's the hardest part to accept. If traditional morality is partly a fraud, then we've all been part of it. We've lived for centuries under a silent pact with a lie, because the lie felt safer than the truth. Nietzsche throws us into the abyss of that truth, not to destroy us, but to provoke us, to strip away the illusions we've inherited and rebuild ourselves with integrity, with a morality that doesn't come from fear, but from a radical yes to life. Have you ever asked yourself if your values really come from you, or if they were programmed into you? Are you living authentically, or just repeating patterns because it's easier to be accepted? Would you have the courage to live your life exactly as it is, all over again? Every mistake, every regret, every loss, every silence you swallowed, every opportunity you missed, every lie you told, coming back again and again in a cycle that never ends. That's the brutal challenge of the eternal return, one of Friedrich Nietzsche's deepest and most disturbing ideas. He didn't propose it as a mystical belief or a theory about how the universe works. Nietzsche wasn't trying to explain time. He was trying to confront you with your life. The eternal return isn't about the universe. It's about you. It works like a reversed mirror. Instead of reflecting who you are now, it reflects who you'd become if you had to repeat every single moment of your life. Forever. It's an existential filter. Whatever you couldn't stand to relive eternally, maybe shouldn't be lived even once. Nietzsche introduces this vision in The Gay Science with a haunting question. What if someday or night a demon were to sneak up to you and say, "This life you are living now, you will have to live it again, countless times, and nothing new will ever happen in it"? That question sounds like something out of a nightmare, but it's actually a direct provocation aimed at your conscience. Because most people live as if there will always be a later, a second chance to fix things. But what if there is no later? What if this very moment is doomed to repeat itself infinitely, with every detail exactly the same? Nietzsche believed that the strong would embrace this idea with joy, not because they enjoy pain, but because they've lived so fully, so honestly, that repeating their life wouldn't be a punishment, it would be a celebration. The weak, however, those who live in fear, conformity, regret, they would be crushed by the eternal return. Because how can you wish to relive a life you never had the courage to truly live? The eternal return pulls us out of our comfort zone. It forces us to face our patterns of escape, that routine you follow without thinking, that excuse you've used for years, that version of yourself you keep alive just to please others. Nietzsche believed humanity's biggest mistake is treating life like a rehearsal, as if there's a hidden meaning, a future salvation, a promised land after death. The eternal return destroys all of that. It gives you nothing but the present, and the responsibility for everything you do with it. And that's where the beauty of the idea lies. It can crush you, or it can set you free. It all depends on how you're living right now. If you see your days as dull obligations, If you spend most of your time wishing for a different life, wanting to be someone else, somewhere else, living another story, then the eternal return becomes a torment. But if you start living with presence, with intensity, with truth, even through hard times, then you turn the moment into eternity. You stop running, and you begin to say yes. Nietzsche isn't saying you need to live in constant joy. He's not talking about a perfect life without pain or failure. He's talking about a life that's so yours, so true to who you really are, that even the mistakes have their rightful place. A life you can say yes to, fully, not despite the suffering, but with it. That full yes to existence is what Nietzsche called Amor Fati, love of fate. Want nothing to be different, not in the past, not in the future. Not just to bear what is necessary, but to love it. That kind of love doesn't come from being passive. It comes from courage. The courage to live without guarantees. The courage to be whole. The courage to stop hiding behind comforting beliefs or absolute truths. Nietzsche believed this kind of courage is rare. Most people, he said, are too weak to love life, too weak to affirm it without conditions, too weak to accept that the meaning of life isn't somewhere else. It's in how you live it. Right now. That's why the eternal return isn't just a weird idea. It's a test, a silent personal judgment that forces you to feel the weight of every choice you make. What if everything came back? Even the smallest things. That conversation you ignored, that message you deleted, that help you didn't offer, that time you wasted, everything. Returning. Again and again. So the question isn't just philosophical, it's deeply practical. Are you living a life worth repeating for all eternity? If your answer is no, that's not a reason to panic. Actually, it might be the start of something powerful. Nietzsche isn't here to condemn you, he's here to challenge you. He's saying, live in such a way that if time started over, you'd welcome it with open arms. Nietzsche didn't invent nihilism. He was just the first to stare it in the face. Without anesthetics, without comfort, without running away. While other philosophers were still looking for salvation in ideas, religious promises, or eternal truths, Nietzsche did what few dared to do. He pointed straight at the abyss sitting at the heart of modern life. And he said, everything you once called meaning is falling apart. For Nietzsche, nihilism isn't an opinion. It's a diagnosis, a symptom of a civilization that destroyed its own foundations. God is dead, and we killed him. But what does that really mean? Nietzsche wasn't just attacking religion. The death of God symbolizes something much bigger, the collapse of all absolute truths that held Western society together for centuries. Without God, there is no revealed truth. Without revealed truth, there's no moral foundation, no final purpose. And without a final purpose, what's left? Nothing. That's nihilism, the brutal feeling that nothing has value in itself, that everything is relative, temporary, hollow, that all the answers we were taught to repeat about good and evil, justice, the soul, the meaning of life, are just human inventions meant to distract us from the raw chaos of reality. But Nietzsche doesn't approach this coldly. He knows how painful that realization is. He writes, "What does nihilism mean? That the highest values devalue themselves. The goal is lacking. The answer to why is missing. Modern culture," he says, "is sick. But instead of facing the sickness, it pretends everything is fine. It covers up the lack of meaning with consumerism, distractions, and recycled moral dogmas that no longer carry any weight. We live in a world that keeps preaching values it no longer believes in. And that, for Nietzsche, is passive nihilism, the most dangerous kind. It's the nihilism of people living on autopilot, repeating hollow ideals, finding comfort in things that are already dead. The nihilism of whatever, of apathy, of indifference, of a life without passion, without intensity, without greatness. Nietzsche hated that kind of existence. To him, the real problem isn't nihilism itself, it's the cowardice in how we respond to it. Most people can't handle a world without given meaning, so they either hide in old beliefs or sink into boredom. Both are forms of spiritual weakness. But there's another kind of nihilism, what Nietzsche calls active nihilism. This is the nihilism of the strong, the ones who realize there's no pre-made meaning and choose to create their own. Yes, God is dead, but that means we're finally free to stop being servants, free to stop kneeling before inherited truths, free to stop parroting commandments like moral robots, and start taking full responsibility for our existence. Active nihilism is the first step toward the revaluation of all values. If nothing is sacred by nature, then it's up to us to choose, create, and affirm what matters. Nietzsche didn't want to destroy meaning, he wanted to set it free from metaphysical chains. But that path isn't for everyone. It takes courage. It takes inner strength. It takes the will to power. Most people prefer comforting lies over brutal truth. They'd rather believe in a universal purpose, in objective morality, in some divine plan that makes all the pain worth it. Nietzsche tears down that illusion, and then he asks, are you strong enough to live without it? Because true nihilism isn't emptiness, it's open space. It's a blank canvas where everything can be rebuilt, but only by those who can handle the weight of freedom. It's easy to be moral when your morality is handed to you. It's hard to build your own compass, to walk your own path, knowing no one's coming to rescue you if you fail. Nietzsche saw nihilism as unavoidable. Modernity, by choosing reason over faith, progress over tradition, the individual over divine authority, had already paved the way for this crisis. When science killed the myths, when critique killed the dogmas, what was left was a vacuum. Nietzsche just had the guts to say out loud what everyone else was feeling inside. And here's the final challenge. Are you ready to live without metaphysical crutches? Are you ready to face life as it is, chaotic, unpredictable, absurd, and still dance through it? Are you ready to create meaning out of nothing? Nietzsche doesn't offer comfort. He offers a mirror, and in that mirror, you won't see a ready-made purpose. You'll see a challenge. You'll see the chance to become something you're not yet, precisely because nothing else is telling you what to be. Behind every morality, behind every act of kindness, behind every talk about altruism and sacrifice, Nietzsche saw something much more raw, much more human. He saw a drive that no one wanted to admit, the will to power. This isn't about political or economic power. Nietzsche goes further. For him, the will to power is the core energy driving all living things, the urge to grow, to expand, to express ourselves, to leave a mark on the world, to push beyond our own limits. It's a concept that makes people uncomfortable because it strips away the polite, civilized mask we use to cover our instincts. When someone says they act out of generosity or love for others, Nietzsche asks, do they really? Or is there behind charity a hidden need to feel superior? Behind morality, the pleasure of judging others? Behind humility, the cleverness of someone who submits to gain control? The will to power isn't always about dominating others. It's about affirming your own existence with intensity. That's why Nietzsche said, man does not seek happiness. He seeks to exert his power. Happiness, to him, isn't the ultimate goal. It's just a side effect of living fully. When we create, when we overcome pain, when we take on a challenge, when we become who we truly are, that's when we feel something close to fulfillment. Not because we won, but because we grew stronger. The problem is, that kind of strength scares people. And in a society built on ideals of submission, sacrifice, and guilt, the will to power has been repressed, denied, morally condemned. They turned this vital instinct into a sin. They told us that to want, to desire, to stand tall is pride, selfishness, vanity. and they taught us that the true noble person is the one who renounces. Nietzsche tears that story apart. He says, that's not virtue, that's fear. Traditional morality, especially Christian morality, he argues, doesn't come from spiritual strength. It comes from the weakness of the resentful, those who couldn't express their will, so they invented a morality where denying yourself became the highest ideal. But deep down, they wanted the same thing: power. They just didn't have the strength to go after it directly. So they built a system where the strong look evil and the weak look virtuous. The will to power is everywhere. It's in the artist who creates, the thinker who questions, the warrior who fights, the teacher who inspires. It's even in the person who calls themselves humble, because even self-denial can be a sneaky form of control. Nietzsche isn't saying everyone wants to rule others all the time. He's saying every living being naturally wants to grow, to become more, and that's not wrong. The tragedy, then, isn't that the will to power exists. The tragedy is that we've been taught to fear it, to feel ashamed of it, and when we suppress it, that energy doesn't disappear. It turns into something toxic. Instead of creating, we criticize. Instead of living, we complain. Instead of affirming ourselves, we try to hold others back. That's how the resentful spirit is born, the one Nietzsche warns us about. The will to power makes people uncomfortable because it demands responsibility. It's not a pass for arrogance. It's not about being a narcissist. It's a challenge. Become the creator of your own life. Stand tall. Own your freedom, because no one else will do it for you. Nietzsche didn't want humans to keep living like slaves or ashamed sinners or small creatures trying to look good. He wanted us to become a force of life, to say yes to life in all its chaos, with desire, with energy, with contradiction, with body, with blood, with truth. In The Will to Power, a posthumous and unfinished work but still revealing, Nietzsche wrote, "Life itself is essentially appropriation, injury, overpowering what is strange and weaker." That shocks people. It doesn't fit the polite, politically correct moral code of today. But Nietzsche wasn't writing to comfort. He was writing to wake people up. And waking up is never comfortable. He's saying, stop hiding your instincts behind masks of virtue. Own your hunger to live intensely. Create new values. Values that don't come from denying life, but from embracing it. The will to power, then, is the creative force behind art, philosophy, science, courage, and personal transformation. It's uncomfortable because it demands greatness. And most people would rather live small, not because they lack ability, but because they're afraid to shine too brightly. Nietzsche saw it clearly. Traditional morality says, hold yourself back. The will to power says, overflow. Nietzsche never wanted you to follow anyone, not even him, much less bow down to ready-made ideals. So when he introduces us to the ÜBERMENSCH, the beyond man, he's not offering an idol to worship, but an abyss to face. The ÜBERMENSCH isn't a hero in a cape, nor a moral role model. He didn't come to save anyone. He's the opposite of that, a living challenge to human mediocrity. Nietzsche presents him in Thus Spoke Zarathustra with a sharp declaration: man is something that shall be overcome. What does that mean? It means that man, as he is now, is unfinished. He's a bridge, not the final destination. But the problem is, most people don't want to cross that bridge. They settle. They're satisfied with the bare minimum. They live to repeat, obey, survive. Nietzsche saw that passivity as the biggest enemy of real life, and the ÜBERMENSCH is the scream that breaks that comfort. He represents a new kind of human, someone who doesn't need absolute truths, dogmas, applause, or permission to live fully. He doesn't follow a script. He writes his own rules. He doesn't kneel to tradition. He transforms it. He doesn't seek approval. He affirms himself even in the face of chaos. But be careful, the ÜBERMENSCH is no utopian dreamer. He doesn't believe in future paradises. He doesn't run from the real world. He embraces it. He doesn't reject suffering. He turns it into creative power. He's someone who can say yes to all of life, even its darkest parts. Nietzsche knew this figure would scare people because it demands courage. And most people don't want freedom. They want safety. They don't want greatness. They want comfort. They don't want responsibility. They want someone to take care of things for them. That's why the Übermensch is a scandal to cowards, because he shines a light on everything we try to hide. Our laziness to think for ourselves. Our fear of messing up without someone to blame. Our quiet desire for someone to just tell us what to do. A father, a god, a government, a guru. The Übermensch is none of those. He is the one who stands on his own, who recreates himself, who breaks and rebuilds himself as many times as needed. And that's why Nietzsche didn't want followers. He wanted to wake up creators, people who can handle the dizzying feeling of living without metaphysical handrails. The Übermensch is Nietzsche's answer to nihilism. If God is dead, and with him the eternal truths. If everything is relative and there's no ready-made meaning, then what now? Most people fall into despair. Others cling to cheap ideologies. Others numb themselves with shallow pleasures. But the Übermensch doesn't run from the void. He looks into the abyss and creates. He knows there's no pre-written essence waiting for him. He knows existence is raw, uncertain, tragic, and still, he says yes to it all. He turns his life into a work of art. Nietzsche wrote, "The Übermensch is the meaning of the earth." That means, stop looking to the sky for answers. There's no salvation in the clouds. Everything you're looking for, strength, truth, meaning, has to be born from you. Here, now, on earth. But most people don't want to hear that, because it destroys the comforting illusion that someone will come save them from their own mediocrity. Nietzsche knew man would rather will nothing than not will at all. We'd rather cling to illusions than face the truth that we are the ones responsible for giving our lives meaning. The Übermensch, above all, is the one who overcomes himself. At every moment. He doesn't live in the past. He doesn't get stuck in fixed identities. He contradicts himself, experiments, challenges himself. He's movement. He's creative tension. He's the constant fight against his own comfort zone. And that's why he's intolerable to cowards, because cowards are always running from themselves. They turn morality into a hiding place, religion into a crutch, tradition into a shield. They'd rather obey, even if it costs them their authenticity. The Übermensch doesn't obey. He listens to himself, but don't confuse this with shallow selfishness. Nietzsche never praised empty narcissism. The Übermensch isn't arrogant, he's free. And that kind of freedom only comes when you take the weight of the whole world onto your own shoulders. When Nietzsche talks about the Übermensch, he's not talking about the future of the species. He's talking about a living possibility, rare, but real. He's saying, you weren't born ready, you are a task. The resentful person can't win. They can't assert their will, can't create, transform, or rise above. So they get revenge, and they do it in the most subtle and destructive way possible, by turning their weakness into a virtue. To Nietzsche, resentment isn't just a negative feeling, like bitterness or bottled-up anger. It's a mindset, a sick way of living. He describes it as a soul disease, a toxic reversal of values that comes from the inability to act, from feeling powerless in the face of reality. The resentful person suffers, but not in a noble way. They don't turn their pain into growth, they collect it. They feed it in silence until it becomes hatred dressed as morality. Here's the thing, the resentful don't want justice, they want payback. But since they have no real power, they can't fight on equal terms with the strong. So they use what they have, morality. And that's how the morality of the weak is born. Nietzsche explains this brilliantly in On the Genealogy of Morality. He says there are two types of morality, master morality and slave morality. Master morality is born from strength, creativity, affirmation. Slave morality comes from resentment. The master says, "I'm good because I'm strong, noble, assertive." The slave, full of resentment, says, "He is evil because he is strong, and I'm good because I'm weak." That reversal is the core of resentment. The defeated person turns their powerlessness into moral superiority. The tragedy? It works. Because the resentful are clever. They don't attack directly. They infect collective values. They build systems where strength looks like cruelty, where courage is seen as arrogance, where pleasure is labeled a sin. They moralize their failure and reshape the world in their image. Nietzsche saw this as a serious threat to human vitality, because the resentful don't just want protection, they want everything above them to be pulled down. They want to level everything. They want to destroy anything that reminds them of their own powerlessness. This is how religions are born that glorify suffering. This is how ideologies rise that treat mediocrity as virtue. This is how social norms are created to punish any sign of greatness. Nietzsche writes, "Resentment makes the weak dangerous, and more than that, they don't hate the strong by accident. They hate them because they secretly admire them. The resentful envy what they can't be. But since they can't live with that silent admiration, they turn it into contempt, into moral condemnation. That's the revenge of the powerless, making the whole world feel guilty for being strong." The resentful say, "If you're rich, you must have been unfair. If you're beautiful, you must be shallow. If you're free, you're irresponsible. If you shine, you're just showing off." They flip everything upside down. They make success look like oppression, strength like arrogance, joy like selfishness. And that's how they control. Nietzsche knew resentment is highly contagious. It spreads through political speeches, religious teachings, school systems, social media, and cultural trends, because it offers something very tempting, a sense of superiority without having to achieve anything. You don't have to win, just call yourself a victim, and the world will bow to you. Just say you are oppressed, and any criticism becomes oppression. Just say you've suffered, and no one is allowed to disagree with you. That's the game of resentment, trading greatness for institutionalized bitterness. But Nietzsche isn't just pointing out a social issue. He's giving a diagnosis of the soul. He's telling us, watch out, the resentful lives in you too. Because it's easier to blame the world than to change yourself. It's easier to judge than to create. Easier to point fingers than to act. Easier to hide behind morality than to face your own failures. Nietzsche isn't glorifying oppression. He's exposing the inversion of values that makes us hate vibrant, powerful life. He's saying it takes courage to love strength, to accept that life is conflict, struggle, creation, and that not all pain is injustice. The resentful want a world without pain, without effort, without hierarchies, but also without brilliance. They want a world where no one can truly shine, where no one can grow without apologizing, where everything is leveled down, so they never have to change. But Nietzsche calls us to something else. He calls us to overcome resentment, not to react with bitterness, but with creativity, not to moralize what we lack, but to build what we can become. Because the real cure for resentment isn't revenge, it's self-overcoming. Nietzsche didn't shout, "God is dead," with arrogance. He didn't proclaim it with pride. He said it like someone announcing a tragedy, a death that wasn't celebrated, but mourned. God is dead, and we killed him. These are the words that echo through the gay science, and later, in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. But Nietzsche isn't just talking about religion. He's talking about the collapse of a foundation, the breakdown of the entire spiritual structure of the Western world. For centuries, God was the foundation of everything: morality, the meaning of life, the cosmic order, the idea of truth. God was the center. Even for those who didn't fully believe, culture still revolved around him. The idea of an absolute justified suffering, defined good and evil, gave direction to life. But then modernity arrived. Science, critical thinking, secularization, human rights, the modern state, technical progress. All of it pushed God further and further out of the center. And in the middle of all this, Nietzsche said what no one wanted to hear. God is dead. God remains dead. And we have killed him. This isn't a line meant to be a meme. It's an open wound. Nietzsche was saying that Western culture killed the very thing it was built on, but still acts as if it's intact, like a body walking around without a heart. The problem, for Nietzsche, isn't the death of God itself, but the emptiness it leaves behind. The abyss, the absence of any final standard to say what's right, what's wrong, what matters. Without God, there is no eternal truth. Without eternal truth, there is no objective morality. Without objective morality, there is no ready-made meaning. So what are we left with? Most people pretend nothing happened. They keep talking about values, justice, the common good, progress. But all those things were branches growing from a root that's now dead. Nietzsche knew. Modernity is a civilization in denial. It killed the foundation, but still acts like the ground is solid. It keeps using the leftovers of faith without admitting the center is gone. This is the great hypocrisy. Pretending morality without a foundation. Pretending meaning without a source of meaning. Pretending certainty when everything floats in the void. Nietzsche writes, "Once we've gotten rid of the real world, all that's left is the apparent one." And what is the apparent? Chaos, twilight of the idols. He didn't say this to cause despair, but to force a brutal awakening. Because when God dies, so does the idea of a pre-written script for life. Gone is the metaphysical safety net. Gone is the promise of reward after pain. And with that dies the illusion that just obeying will make everything make sense. Now the full responsibility is on us. We have to create new values. We have to carry the weight of existing with no guarantees. But here's the problem. Few people are brave enough to face that abyss. Most run back to recycled dogmas. If it's not God, it's the state. If it's not heaven, it's the market. If it's not Judgment Day, it's some political utopia. But all of it is just makeup covering a void no one wants to face. Nietzsche saw this as a deep spiritual crisis. Not just a crisis of faith, but of inner strength, of the will to live without clinging to comforting illusions. The death of God is grief, and like all grief, it comes in phases. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression. But Nietzsche wanted to push us toward the final phase. Acceptance. Acceptance that there is no center. Acceptance that the universe wasn't made to comfort us. Acceptance that we must give meaning to our own existence if we want to live authentically. That's the challenge. Can you live without an absolute? Can you carry your life without a divine guarantee? Can you create value in a world that offers none? Nietzsche believed only the strong could handle this. The weak would look for shelter. They would invent new religions in disguise. They would cling to moralism, resentment, and safe mediocrity. But the strong, they would turn the void into a creative space. They would say yes to life without a promise of salvation. They would become creators of values. That's why the death of God isn't the end. It's the beginning of a new spiritual era. An era with no masters, no metaphysical crutches, no ready-made dogmas. But to enter it, you have to look into the abyss. And, as Nietzsche warns, the abyss will look back at you. Nietzsche didn't hate Christ, but he despised what was done to him. He looked at institutional Christianity and saw the ultimate denial of life. Not a doctrine of love, but a value system built on fear, resentment, and powerlessness. In The Antichrist, Nietzsche writes, "Christianity is a metaphysics of the hangman. It's the religion of suffering, of the weak, of the miserable." There's no sugarcoating in that statement, and that's intentional. Nietzsche writes like someone trying to wake up a numb world. To him, Christianity was the great anesthetic of Western culture. Why? Because it turned everything weak, sick, passive, and bitter into a virtue. It made poverty a blessing, renunciation a form of salvation, suffering a source of merit, submission an ideal. To Nietzsche, this wasn't spiritual elevation, it was survival strategy for the weak. He saw Christianity as the triumph of the slave morality. Those who couldn't assert their strength in the world created a moral system where weakness became sacred, where wanting little became humility, where silence became wisdom, where not fighting back became forgiveness. But none of this, according to Nietzsche, came from real virtue. It came from resentment, from powerless anger that couldn't act in the real world, so it took revenge through morality. It created a doctrine that humiliated the strong and glorified the weak. In that sense, Christianity wasn't the opposite of evil. It was the opposite of life. Nietzsche wrote, "Christianity has been the greatest misfortune of mankind so far, because it taught people to reject their instincts, their bodies, their will. It made denial of the flesh seem holy. It turned desire into sin, joy into a threat, a full life into something dangerous. Everything natural, powerful, life-affirming became suspicious." Nietzsche saw that as a direct attack on the human spirit, not just a theological mistake, but a cultural illness, a sickness of civilization. To him, the real Christ, the historical man, free, rebellious, who lived with intensity and died for his truth, was distorted by the church, turned into a martyr, a symbol of pain, an icon of guilt. And on that image, the church built a system that replaced life with judgment, freedom with fear, creative impulse with sacrifice. Christianity, in Nietzsche's eyes, doesn't want you to win. It wants you to obey. It wants you to feel small, to feel guilty for your desires, to ask for forgiveness just for being strong, to kneel, to wait for heaven, wait for divine justice, wait for salvation. As long as you deny everything in the present, that's the real trick. Turn the present into sin, and the future into a promise. Meanwhile, you live submissively, tame, guilty, controlled. Nietzsche saw all of this as poisoning the soul, a reversal of values that had castrated the human spirit for 2,000 years. And the worst part? This Christian morality doesn't set people free, it traps them, because obeying isn't enough. You have to feel guilty for wanting what's natural. You have to hate yourself. Nietzsche saw this self-hatred as Christianity's real triumph, not through faith, but through guilt. Original sin, the idea that man is born guilty, is one of the cruelest ideas ever conceived, the Antichrist. Think about it. A religion that tells you you're born wrong, that you need saving, that you'll never be pure enough, that you must constantly deny yourself. That's not freedom. That's dependence. That's psychological control. Nietzsche wasn't attacking believers. He was attacking a symbolic structure that tames the human spirit, that stops people from affirming life, power, creativity, and earthly joy. He believed life only has value when it's affirmed without holding back. And Christianity, with its logic of sin, punishment, and afterlife reward, makes life feel like something to endure, not something to celebrate. That's why he said, "I am the Antichrist," not in a religious sense, but as a symbol of everything that opposes life denial. Nietzsche wanted to tear off the veils of guilt, fear, and moral submission. He wanted to free people from the inner chains of servitude. But that's scary, because without heaven, without sin, without salvation, you're left alone with your freedom. And that's what many people can't handle. They'd rather live a smaller life, but a safe one. They'd rather have the peace of obedience than the pain of responsibility. Nietzsche knew his criticism of Christianity wasn't for everyone. It was for those ready to live without chains. To Nietzsche, Western culture was like a sick body, a spiritually poisoned civilization, living off rotting values, repeating dead ideas as if they still held meaning. His proposal was as radical as it was necessary, to transvaluate all values. What does that mean? It means turning the soul of Western culture upside down. It means questioning everything we've been taught to call good, just, true, or moral. It means refusing to accept any value as natural, eternal, or sacred, and instead seeing that all values have historical, psychological, and often sick origins. Nietzsche tells us that the values we now see as universal, like humility, self-denial, submission, and compassion, weren't born from strength. They were born from weakness. They came from resentment, from slave morality, from the victory of the powerless over those who affirm life. Judeo-Christian culture, according to Nietzsche, reversed the original values of noble life. Where strength was once admired, weakness was glorified. Where pride was once a virtue, it became a sin. Where life was once embraced with courage, now came sermons about denial, guilt, and self-punishment. The tragedy? This morality was accepted as if it were universal, as if it had always been that way. But Nietzsche refused to accept that. He believed these values were imposed by a sick culture and that we must outgrow them. Transvaluation is a call to inner revolution, a rebellion against inherited values. But Nietzsche isn't just replacing one dogma with another. He doesn't hand you a new set of commandments. He wants to destroy the very idea that values should be blindly followed. That's why he doesn't tell you what to think. He tells you, think for yourself, create your own values, become the source of your own morality. But that takes courage, because inherited values offer comfort. They bring approval and a sense of belonging. Questioning them means being labeled immoral. It means being misunderstood, excluded, maybe even hated. But Nietzsche challenges, would you rather be accepted by a decaying world or stay loyal to your own truth? Transvaluation is what separates the last man from the ÜBERMENSCH. The last man avoids pain, craves comfort, and accepts ready-made values. The ÜBERMENSCH breaks free from all of that. He says yes to all of life, even if it puts him against the world. Nietzsche doesn't want to fix morality. He wants to blow it up. He wants to free us from inherited concepts, guilt, and the denial of our instincts. Only then can we truly embrace life. He writes, we need a critique of moral values. We must know the value of these values, on the genealogy of morals. This is the core question. Are the values we live by actually good for life? Or are they tools of control? Mechanisms of domestication? Nietzsche believed traditional morality is anti-life. It doesn't make us stronger. It weakens us. It doesn't free us. It represses us. It doesn't help us grow. It keeps us small. That's why he wanted to flip everything upside down, not out of blind rebellion, but out of radical clarity. He wanted a morality born from power, not fear. A morality that teaches us to create, not to obey. A morality that says yes to life, not no to the body, desire, and the world. He knew this would be shocking. He even said he was writing for the few, for those willing to carry the burden of thinking for themselves. Because transvaluation isn't just an idea, it's a way of living. It means confronting everything you've ever believed, putting your faith, morals, and ideals to the test, and in the end, having the guts to throw away what no longer serves you, even if it leaves you alone, even if it rips you from the comfort of the herd. Nietzsche writes, everything that has been honored for so long must be brought down. Everything that was denied must be set free. The Antichrist. That's what transvaluation means. An existential act of freedom. A rejection of life denial. Allowed enough after centuries of guilt, submission, and inner slavery. But Nietzsche doesn't tell you what should replace it, because that's your job. Each person must create their own code. Not a universal code, but a way of life that reflects your uniqueness. And that's exactly what makes his philosophy so dangerous. Because most people don't want freedom. They want safety. They want to follow, not create. they want to obey, not become authors of their own lives. Nietzsche offers the opposite: uncertainty, depth, responsibility, greatness. But only in that space, he says, can life become truly worth living. For centuries, Western philosophy chased an ideal: absolute truth. One single truth, eternal, objective, and independent of anyone. Plato placed it in the world of ideas. Christians placed it in God. Modern science tried to pin it down in universal laws. But Nietzsche came along and said what no one wanted to hear: that kind of truth doesn't exist. Or rather, if it does, we can never reach it without being part of it. Every truth you know is, in fact, just a perspective. And believing in a single, eternal, ultimate truth is nothing more than comfort for the weak. For Nietzsche, there's no such thing as a pure fact. There are only interpretations. You don't see the world as it is. You see it from where you are, from your body, your history, your culture, your desires, your pain. And that's not a flaw. It's the condition of existence. So why does that bother people so much? Because we've been taught that truth is something outside of us, something cold, objective, neutral, absolute. We've been told that seeking truth means erasing ourselves, shutting down our emotions, removing subjectivity. Nietzsche turns all of this upside down. He says, you never step outside of yourself. And every time you say, this is the truth, what you're really saying is, this makes sense from where I stand, from my strength, my desire, my body, and my culture. He wrote, there are no facts, only interpretations. But hold on. Nietzsche isn't some shallow relativist. He's not saying everything is true or that all opinions are equal. That would just be another form of intellectual laziness. And Nietzsche had no patience for people who used skepticism as an excuse to stop thinking. What he's saying is much deeper and more subtle. Every truth is the result of a struggle between forces. It comes from a specific perspective, and some perspectives have more power to affirm life than others. For example, a truth born from fear, denial of life, or repression of instinct, that's a weak perspective. But a truth born from affirmation, courage, experimentation, and embodiment, that's a stronger, more vital, more creative one. Nietzsche forces us to question the value of each truth. He asks, does this truth make you stronger or weaker? Does it set you free or trap you? Does it come from life, or is it a symptom of decay? Because many so-called truths floating around are just convenient lies, human inventions that forgot they were invented. Take moral truths, for example. We're told what's right and wrong as if it were absolute. But Nietzsche asks, right for whom? Wrong for whom? In what culture? What context? For what purpose? A morality that praises humility and sacrifice might just be the perspective of the weak trying to protect their position. And what about religion? Nietzsche saw religious truths as coming from the perspective of the resentful. Not divine revelations, but symbolic systems built to justify suffering, maintain control, and tame human instincts. And even science, which claims to be objective, is shaped by perspective, by decisions about what to observe, how to measure, and how to interpret the data, by cultural, economic, and political values. That doesn't make science useless, but it reveals it as another human creation, not a direct window into pure truth. Nietzsche's not saying we shouldn't pursue knowledge. He's saying we need to be honest about what we're doing. We're always interpreting life, based on where we are, who we are, and what we want. That's why he said, every impulse is an interpretation, and that's exactly what scares people. If there's no single truth, then there's no guaranteed path. You can't hide behind dogmas anymore. You can't say this is right because it's always been that way. You can't use truth as a weapon to silence others. You have to take responsibility for your own perspective. You have to build meaning from within, without pretending it came from the sky or some divine authority. Nietzsche's perspectivism is both a liberation and a burden. It gives you freedom but takes away the ground beneath your feet. It destroys the comfort of fixed truth and puts you at the center of creation. Most people aren't ready for that. Most people want certainty, even if it's fake. They want a single truth to tell them what's right, what's good, what matters. They want a manual, not a cliff edge. But Nietzsche writes for those who can handle the abyss, for those with the courage to live without guarantees, for those who understand that truth isn't something you find, it's something you fight for, build, and embody. In the end, perspectivism doesn't say truth is dead. It says truth is always a living creation. And it's up to you to ask yourself, this truth that lives in me, is it really mine? Or just a beautifully decorated cage? A free spirit is, above all, a danger, a disruption, a presence that unsettles, not by attacking, but simply by existing independently. Nietzsche describes it as someone who thinks for themselves, even if it means walking alone, being hated or misunderstood, because the free spirit doesn't bow, it doesn't fit in, it doesn't kneel before inherited truths, imposed rules, or ready-made moral codes. It prefers the discomfort of freedom over the peace of obedience. And that's why it's so frightening, because wherever it goes, dogmas start to shake, traditions wrinkle, conventions shrink. Nietzsche saw the free spirit as rare but essential, the one who breaks away from herd mentality, blind obedience, and the mindless repetition of the crowd's values. And here's the most interesting part. The free spirit isn't born that way. They're not some enlightened genius from the start. They're someone who goes through an inner transformation, someone who had the courage to question everything, especially themselves. Nietzsche writes, "To be independent is the privilege of the strong, because real freedom isn't doing whatever you want. That's easy. Real freedom is thinking what no one else dares to think. It's living according to your own truth, even if it costs you the approval of others. And that comes at a price." The free spirit is almost always disliked, called arrogant, cold, dangerous, a heretic, because their very existence challenges the comfortable structure most people depend on. The conformist doesn't hate the free spirit because they're bad. They hate them because they reveal what the conformist hides from themselves. They expose cowardice dressed up as virtue, blind faith hiding behind fear, the laziness to think disguised as loyalty to tradition. The free spirit isn't against society, they're against lies. And the most dangerous lie is the one pretending to be an absolute truth. Nietzsche knew the world was full of fake values, values that claim to be eternal but are just social conventions. And the free spirit is the one who approaches those values with a hammer, not to destroy everything, but to tap them and listen if they still ring with life. They don't destroy for fun. They destroy because they must, to make room for something more honest, more creative, more alive. But the path of the free spirit is a lonely one. They don't easily find their place in the world, because the world loves sameness. The world rewards those who follow, who conform, who say yes to authority, to religion, to the group. The free spirit, on the other hand, says maybe, says I don't know, says I need to try it for myself. And that I don't know is more dangerous than 1,000 certainties. Nietzsche warns us, most people don't want freedom. They want comfort. They want someone to tell them what's right. They want clear rules, promised rewards, guaranteed salvation. The free spirit threatens all of that because they live without handrails. But that's exactly why they're so essential. In a world becoming more automated, polarized, ideological, and moralistic, the free spirit is the last spark of clarity. They are the one who refuses to be captured by slogans, parties, doctrines, churches, traditions. They don't belong anywhere, but they are whole within themselves, and that makes them powerful. Nietzsche writes, "The true free spirit is the one who has also freed themselves from the spirit of freedom. Human, all too human." That means they don't turn freedom into a new idol. They don't become slaves to rebellion. They don't just say the opposite to be contrary. They're not reactive. They're creators. And what do they create? A life that is truly theirs. Not a life shaped by culture, morality, religion, academia, family, or the media, but a life that rises from within, from their own power, contradictions, and courage. Nietzsche knew to be a free spirit is to carry the weight of yourself, to live without guarantees, to think knowing that every honest thought will pull you further from the crowd, but closer to yourself. The free spirit doesn't seek applause. They don't want to convince anyone. They just want to stay true to their own inner honesty. And that's enough. Nietzsche isn't asking you to become a rebel without a cause. He's asking, are you capable of living without moral crutches? Can you think without needing blessings or approval? Can you lose the world to gain yourself? Because only then, he says, will you truly deserve the freedom you claim to want. Nietzsche's words never aimed to offer easy comfort. He didn't believe in redemption, paradise, or any given meaning. On the contrary, he looked at existence as it is, raw, tragic, absurd. And yet, he didn't turn cynical. Nietzsche was a realist to his core, and even then, he never gave in to despair. Because he found in art the only refuge worth having, not a hiding place, but a way to affirm life, even when it hurts, breaks, and drives us mad. To him, art isn't an escape. It's not anesthesia. It's not some shallow distraction. True art, Nietzsche said, is creation in the face of chaos. It's an aesthetic yes to the absurdity of the world. In The Birth of Tragedy, he puts it plainly. Only as an aesthetic phenomenon is existence and the world eternally justified. That doesn't mean the world becomes beautiful or good because of art. It means that even in the face of senseless suffering, of pain without purpose, of death without redemption, art can still create beauty, not despite the chaos, but from it. Art is where the human being rises without lying to themselves, where they face the truth without being crushed by it. Nietzsche saw this in Greek tragedy, not just as theatre, but as a deep human experience. In tragedy, suffering is laid bare in its most brutal form, and yet, the audience doesn't leave defeated. They leave transformed. Because in that union of Dionysian chaos and Apollonian order, the pain is embraced and transfigured. The Dionysian represents instinct, ecstasy, the irrational, the tragic. It's the realization that life has no ultimate order, that existence is excess, disorder, pain. But the Apollonian brings form, structure, and beauty, and art is born in that tension. Nietzsche didn't believe reason could save us. To him, reason was a liar. It created illusions of control, of stability, of logic in a world that constantly moves. Art, on the other hand, doesn't lie. It doesn't promise salvation, only intensity. And intensity, for Nietzsche, was the only true measure of value. That's why he wrote in The Gay Science, "We have art so that we do not die of the truth, because truth, raw, unfiltered, is unbearable to the human spirit. The truth that there is no eternal meaning, no cosmic justice, that we suffer, we die, and the universe moves on, indifferent." Most people run from that. They find comfort in faith, in morality, in routine, in distractions. Nietzsche rejected all of it. He didn't want a softened world. He wanted one fully embraced in all its brutality. And in that world, art is the only legitimate affirmation, because art doesn't deny anything, it transforms. Pain becomes poetry, loss becomes music, anxiety becomes painting, absurdity becomes theatre. And in that, art becomes more truthful than any philosophical system, more honest than any morality, more powerful than any doctrine. Art doesn't explain, it expresses. It doesn't solve the mystery, it dances with it. Nietzsche saw art as the highest form of spiritual health, because the true artist doesn't try to hide the wound, he shows it with courage. he turns fragility into creation, his chaos into style, his mortality into intensity. And that takes strength, because to create is not just to produce. It's to stand firm in front of the void, to stare into the abyss, and instead of being consumed by it, use it as raw material. Nietzsche despised fake art, the kind that pretends, that moralizes, that tries to paint over life with false beauty. He wanted living art, tragic, raw, pulsating, art that turned suffering into aesthetic resistance. That's why he loved the tragic Greeks, why he loved Shakespeare, why he loved Beethoven, creators who didn't apologize for feeling too much, creators who didn't hide life's violence. They transformed it into elevated experience. For Nietzsche, the artist was the real priest of existence, not the one who promises salvation, but the one who gives shape to chaos, even knowing there's no final justification for it. That's the ethics of art in Nietzsche, not to save, to create, not to comfort, to intensify, not to lie, to transfigure. And most importantly, this creative power isn't reserved for painters, poets, or musicians. Nietzsche believed your whole life could be a work of art. He wrote, "Become who you are. That is the greatest art." Existence itself can be lived as creation. Every choice, every word, every gesture, a brushstroke on the tragic canvas of reality. Art as a way of living, an aesthetic of existence. Nietzsche dreamed of a world full of creators, people who didn't just repeat what they inherited, but invented new ways to live with pain. People who didn't hide suffering, but didn't let it crush them either. Because in the end, the true artist, the one who affirms life even when it bleeds, is the only one who can truly say they lived authentically. And for Nietzsche, that was more than enough. According to Nietzsche, reason alone isn't enough to understand life. Quite the opposite. He believed reason is just a fragile disguise, a desperate attempt to force order onto something that, at its core, is chaos, excess, intoxication, pain, impulse, raw pulse. To him, life isn't logical, it's tragic. And that's where he introduced one of the most powerful ideas in his philosophy, the Apollonian and the Dionysian. Two principles, two forces, two ways of engaging with the world, not enemies, but tensions that live inside all of us. The Apollonian stands for form, balance, harmony, clarity. It's the realm of reason, beauty, order. It's humanity's attempt to create limits within the limitless. It's the dream that gives structure to the nightmare of reality. The Dionysian, on the other hand, rejects restraint. It represents excess, chaos, ecstasy, drunkenness, a wild merging with the whole. It's irrational, instinctive, unconscious, destructive and creative at the same time. Dionysus doesn't stand for mere disorder. He embodies the raw, unbearable depth of existence. Nietzsche saw that Western culture, shaped by Socratic rationalism and Christian morality, clung to the Apollonian as if it were the only way to survive. As if everything could be explained, controlled, categorized. As if life could be reduced to logic, science, moral rules, and symmetry. But life has never been just form. It's blood, desire, destruction, rage, pain, birth and death in cycles that reason can't tame. The Apollonian tries to cover up the Dionysian, but it never fully succeeds. The beauty we see in art, in rules, in social norms, in culture, it's all a veil, a surface, a desperate effort to avoid looking into the abyss. Nietzsche knew this. That's why he wrote, "It is only as an aesthetic phenomenon that existence and the world are eternally justified." But what kind of aesthetic? The tragic aesthetic. One that doesn't deny chaos, but transforms it. That's why Nietzsche turned to ancient Greek tragedy, especially the works of Aeschylus and Sophocles. There, he saw a rare moment where Apollo and Dionysus danced together. Form and chaos shared the same stage. In tragedy, the hero isn't rewarded. Morality isn't restored. Suffering isn't explained away. And yet, there's beauty, there's intensity. There's something that lifts us, not because it comforts, but because it confronts us with the deepest truth. Life is suffering, and yet it's still worth living. Tragedy doesn't save, it reveals. It shows that beneath every mask, there's a world that refuses to be tamed. Nietzsche believed that after Socrates, and then Plato, Christianity, and modern rationalism, this balance was lost. The Dionysian was repressed. Drunkenness became sin. Instinct became error. Pain became punishment. Chaos became something to avoid, conquer, suppress. The result? A sick culture, a mutilated human being, a civilization that pretends to be balanced but is completely disconnected from life's deepest forces. Nietzsche calls us to bring Dionysus back, to stop treating chaos as the enemy, to stop running from suffering as if it were unnatural. He's not telling us to destroy reason, but to put it in its place. Reason is useful, but limited. It can organize, but not create. It can explain, but not live. Dionysus, on the other hand, is the rhythm of life itself. He is what pulses beneath all form. He breaks the old so something new can be born. For Nietzsche, art should be the space where this tension is fully embraced. Art that doesn't deny pain, but embraces it. Art that doesn't hide the tragedy of existence, but elevates it. He believed that the West's biggest mistake was killing Dionysus in the name of Apollo, and any philosophy that seeks only clarity, balance, and eternal truths is blind from the start. Because truth, to Nietzsche, isn't something you find, it's something you create. And only those who dive deep into the Dionysian can create with real power. So, chaos isn't something to be defeated, it's something to dance with. Nietzsche invites us to a way of living where chaos isn't erased by reason, it's turned into artistic power, where pain isn't denied by morality, it's affirmed through beauty. And maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. There's no stable harmony. Life isn't a well-rehearsed play, it's a stage on fire. And only those who dance in the flames can say they truly lived. Nietzsche didn't fear suffering. He didn't fear chaos, pain, mistakes, or the collapse of certainty. What he truly feared, what he deeply despised, was mediocrity, a lukewarm existence, a life that doesn't dare, a soul that settles for less. And that's what he saw rising on the horizon of modern life, the rise of the last man. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche introduces this figure with bitter irony. The last man isn't a monster. He's not a tyrant. He's not a destroyer. The last man is worse than that. He's someone who's given up. He doesn't want to fight or create or rise above himself. He just wants to be comfortable. He wants safety, health, entertainment, routine, peace, and nothing more. Nietzsche describes him like this. The last man invented happiness. People used to go mad, say the clever ones, and they blink. The last man blinks. That small gesture says it all. He mocks passion. He mocks intensity. He mocks both suffering and greatness, because he no longer feels anything deeply. He no longer gets sick in the soul, but he also doesn't rise. He doesn't create. He doesn't take risks. He doesn't suffer in a tragic way, because he no longer lives in a tragic way. Nietzsche saw this kind of person growing in modern bourgeois culture, with the obsession for comfort, technological progress, and shallow well-being. He saw humans turning into house pets, tamed, bored, content, and proud of their stability. Mediocrity in this sense doesn't mean lack of intelligence. It means lack of depth, lack of inner height, lack of existential risk. The last man no longer needs God, but he's too afraid to create his own values. He lives in emptiness and turns that emptiness into a lifestyle. Nietzsche writes, "They left the lands where life was hard because they need warmth. A little poison now and then. That makes for pleasant dreams." Thus spoke Zarathustra. Those lands where life was hard are the places of challenge, intensity, and growth. The last man runs from them. He avoids the tragic. He avoids the sublime. He avoids anything that might shake him. He wants to live in a flat world, no extremes, no real dangers, but also no real heights. And that's where Nietzsche saw the problem. When you erase suffering, you also erase greatness. The price of total stability is the loss of spirit, because human beings, according to Nietzsche, weren't born to just be okay. We were born to create, to fight, to go beyond ourselves. Pain is not a mistake, it's a path. Conflict is not a flaw, it's a chance to grow. But the last man wants to delete all of that. He wants comfort without crisis, happiness without depth, life without intensity. And so he becomes what Nietzsche feared the most, a being with no purpose. The last man doesn't want freedom. He wants to be spared. He wants to live a long life, even if every day is exactly the same. He has no faith, but also no doubt. No rebellion, but also no passion. He's content with distractions, small pleasures, and recycled ideas. It's the triumph of the ordinary, of the herd mentality, of the person who confuses peace with numbness, who calls conformity wisdom and calls boldness madness. Nietzsche didn't see this as progress. He saw it as the final decline of the human spirit. Because when nothing is sacred anymore, when nothing is dangerous, when everything is predictable, life loses its tension, and the soul loses its depth. The last man lives like someone just passing time, just filling space, just breathing out of habit. And the worst part, he thinks he's won. Nietzsche warns us, this figure is not from the future. He's already among us. He's in the crowds that are satisfied with less, in the culture that values what's easy, comfortable, and sellable, in institutions that tame the mind, in messages that praise sameness, normality, and the predictable. But Nietzsche didn't just want to criticize, he wanted to awaken. He wrote for those who still long for depth, for those who aren't satisfied with mediocrity, for those who feel that there must be more to life than just working well. And for them, he proposed the opposite of the last man, the ÜBERMENSCH, the overman, the one who creates new values, who takes risks, who dances on the edge, who says yes to life, even when it's hard. Nietzsche believed the real danger wasn't pain, it was the lack of meaning, and that only those with the courage to create could overcome it. So he challenged us. Do you want to be spared? Or do you want to be transformed? Do you want comfort? Or do you want depth? Because in the end, the greatest danger of modern life isn't war, chaos, or crisis. It's the man who no longer desires anything. The man who no longer dreams, who no longer seeks, who no longer rises. The last man. Nietzsche's philosophy doesn't offer comfort. It doesn't promise relief, inner peace, or some ready-made meaning to soothe life's pain. What it offers is a challenge, maybe the hardest of all, to say yes to all of life, even the bitter parts, even the moments that broke you, even the things you'd give anything to forget. That's the heart of Amor Fati, the love of fate. But be careful. This isn't about giving up. Nietzsche isn't saying, just accept what happened to you and move on. He's saying, affirm it, love it, be grateful for it. Not just the pleasure, the beauty, the wins, but also the pain, the loss, the mistakes, the chaos. Because all of it is life, and denying any part of it means denying yourself. Nietzsche writes in Ex Homo, my formula for greatness in a human being is Amor Fati, to not want anything to be different, not in the past, not in the future, not for all eternity. This isn't a feel-good quote. It's a brutal spiritual demand. Loving your fate isn't pretending everything has a hidden purpose. It's having the strength to create meaning, even when life feels meaningless. Amor Fati is the opposite of playing the victim. It's the opposite of escape. It's the opposite of denial. It means looking your deepest pain in the eye and saying, it was necessary, it was mine, it made me who I am. And that takes a kind of courage most people don't have. Because most people want to make deals with life. Take the good, reject the bad, pick the flowers, avoid the thorns. Nietzsche had no patience for this comfortable selectiveness. To him, loving life only when it feels good is cowardice pretending to be gratitude. Here's the real test. Would you have the guts to live your exact life all over again? Not once, but forever. That's where Amor Fati and the eternal return connect. Nietzsche tied these two ideas together like fire and form. The eternal return asks, could you bear to live your life exactly as it is over and over for eternity? And Amor Fati answers, yes, I would love even what feels unbearable. Now, Nietzsche's not romanticizing suffering. He's not saying pain is good. He's saying it's real. And running from it is running from life itself. Amor Fati is a turning point. It's when you stop asking the universe for answers. It's when you let go of control and embrace the whole thing. Even what was unfair. Even what makes you feel ashamed. Even the emptiness that still hurts. Nietzsche believed real strength doesn't come from overcoming pain, but from absorbing it into your story. Loving your fate means turning every scar into style. It's looking back with no regret. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was yours. And that's only possible when you stop measuring life with old-school moral standards. When you stop judging everything as right or wrong, success or failure, and start asking, did this make me deeper? Did this help me grow? Did this make me more real? Nietzsche saw Amor Fati as the highest human attitude. Not because it's spiritual, not because it's moral, but because it's artistic. He wanted life to be lived like a work of art, and no masterpiece is made with only light colors. The tragic, the dark, the ugly, all of it is part of the composition. The artist doesn't erase what's ugly, he transforms it. And that's what Nietzsche asks of us. Be the artist of your own life. Paint even your despair with dignity. Amor Fati isn't a feeling you wait to feel. It's a choice you live out. And like any hard choice, it takes time. It takes a kind of existential maturity. It means looking at life with no illusions and still having the strength to say, yes, I want all of it, nothing less. Nietzsche knew this tragic yes would be unbearable for the weak. Most people want comfort. They want hope. They want guarantees. Amor Fati doesn't offer any of that. It only offers the freedom to stop asking, to stop depending on a why, to stop demanding that the universe protect you from pain. And that freedom, raw, heavy, misunderstood, is why Amor Fati is a path for the strong. For those who don't need to lie to themselves, just to keep going. Nietzsche isn't telling you to enjoy your pain. He's telling you, turn even pain into something you can affirm. Make it a springboard, not a prison. Make it your raw material, not your excuse. Make it part of your style, not your shame. Because when you say yes to what once felt unbearable, you stop being a hostage. You stop being a spectator. You become a creator. And in the end, that's all Nietzsche wanted. A human being who, in the face of pain, loss, and absurdity, doesn't break, but becomes deeper. For Nietzsche, philosophy wasn't some intellectual game. It wasn't about debating abstract concepts in closed rooms, writing books no one reads, or name-dropping dead thinkers like a collection. To him, philosophy was something far more brutal, throwing your own flesh into the fire. Philosophy, according to Nietzsche, isn't meant to comfort you. It's meant to wake you up, to expose you, to shake your deepest certainties. He had nothing but contempt for academic philosophy, the kind that hides behind abstractions, builds protective systems, and pretends to be neutral, the kind that talks about life without getting its hands dirty, that thinks about the world without living the thought. Nietzsche wanted philosophers who bled, thinkers who put their own bodies on the line, who embodied their ideas, who became their own experiment. He wrote, "You're not a philosopher just because you love knowledge. You're a philosopher because you've lived it, suffered it, and been transformed by it. Ecce homo." That's the core difference. For Nietzsche, Truth shouldn't comfort you. It should burn. It's not a spiritual blanket. It's an existential wildfire. Most people turn to philosophy looking for safety. They want answers. They want a map that says, everything's fine, you're on the right path. Nietzsche rips that map apart and says, if you want peace, go to church. If you want truth, get ready to face the abyss. Because when taken seriously, truth isn't pleasant. It breaks you down. It forces you to rebuild from scratch. In this way, philosophy is an act of courage. It's not about how much you know. It's about how much you can take. It's about facing the collapse of your illusions. It's about staring into the mirror and refusing to look away. Nietzsche knew that great thinkers aren't the ones who explain things best. They're the ones who live the deepest. That's why he had no respect for armchair philosophers, the ones who hide behind abstract theories. He asked, how much of a philosopher is courage? How much is creative power? Because to philosophize is to face reality with no metaphysical shield, to think without needing guarantees, to live as if every idea is a risk. And here's the most uncomfortable truth. Nietzsche believed many people turn to philosophy not to face life, but to escape it. They use thought as a shield, as a safe excuse not to act. But to him, that's not philosophy. That's just rationalized fear. The real philosopher, Nietzsche says, is someone who walks through chaos with clarity, who doesn't seek meaning handed to them, but creates meaning from the void, who turns pain into concept, and concept into style. He wrote, philosophy, as I understand it, means living dangerously. The gay science. Dangerous. Why? Because you lose the ground under your feet. You lose the easy answers. You lose the inherited truths. And you have to rebuild everything from within. That's what Nietzsche does with every page he writes. He doesn't give you rest. He doesn't offer relief. He forces you to take full responsibility for existing. That's why he writes with blood. That's why he prefers aphorisms over long essays, because each sentence is like a grenade thrown at lazy thinking. That's what separates Nietzsche from system builders. While they build theoretical towers to explain the world, Nietzsche is busy tearing down the scaffolding. He wants to know, what holds up your ideas, strength or fear? Do you believe what you believe because you discovered it, or because someone taught you to repeat it? To Nietzsche, philosophy should be like a blade, cutting through everything that's fake, everything inherited, everything not rooted in your own lived experience. He wrote, do you believe in your truth? Then live as if it were a fire that burns everything around you. Posthumous fragment, 1887. He doesn't care how many books you've read. He wants to know how much you're willing to lose for an idea. How much of you is in your thinking. That's why, for Nietzsche, there's no line between philosophy and life. An idea only matters if it's lived. If it was born out of pain. If it left marks on you. Philosophy that doesn't change you, that doesn't keep you up at night, that doesn't make you uncomfortable, is just dead knowledge. Nietzsche wanted something else. He wanted thinking that pulses. He wanted philosophers who were also artists, warriors, creators, poets. Not knowledge workers, but people who risk everything when they think. He knew this would scare most people away, because most people want formulas, not wounds. They want systems, not blood. But Nietzsche wrote for the few, for those who can handle the pain of thinking with their whole being, for those who don't want to be protected from truth, but transformed by it. For Nietzsche, truth is not sacred, it's not eternal, it's not objective, and maybe it doesn't even exist, not the way we were taught to believe. What we call truth, he says, is just an illusion that forgot it was an illusion. A lie told so well, repeated so often, polished so neatly with language that it started to look real. Nietzsche isn't saying that everything is false. He's saying that what we call truth is a construction, and every construction comes with interests, limits, and distortions. In his essay, On Truth and Lies, in a non-moral sense, he writes, "Truth is a mobile army of metaphors, metonymies, anthropomorphisms." In other words, what we take as what is actually a fragile symbolic system invented by us to make the world bearable, to make it understandable, controllable, digestible. Because reality isn't clear. It's overwhelming, messy, ambiguous, contradictory, and the human mind can't handle that excess. So what do? We invent concepts, we give things names, we reduce complexity into fixed categories, we create language, morality, science, not as reflections of the world, but as tools to symbolically dominate it. But here's the problem. Over time, we forget that it was all made up. We start treating these human creations as if they were natural laws. Nietzsche calls this out with irony and blunt force. He asks, what is truth? A type of error without which a certain kind of life couldn't survive. That means truth isn't something we discover. It's something we need. Not because it reflects something eternal, but because it protects us from chaos. It keeps us from collapsing in the face of the abyss we call existence. Language is the best example of this. When we say tree, we believe we're naming something real, but what exists in reality isn't a tree. It's a flow, a process, a living transformation. Tree is just a label, a useful invention, a social agreement that helps organize perception. But we confuse the word with the thing. Language becomes an invisible prison. And worse, everything that doesn't fit into the categories we created gets dismissed as error, madness, irrationality. Nietzsche wants to remind us the world doesn't fit inside words. Truth, as a closed system, is always a simplification, and often a convenient lie. And why do we choose that lie? Because reality, as it is unbearable. Nietzsche writes, "Man prefers to believe what he needs to live, rather than what is true. We want security, predictability, meaning. We want to believe there's a hidden order behind everything, that suffering has a reason, that good always wins, that justice exists somewhere in the cosmos. But reality doesn't offer guarantees. It doesn't give us ready-made meaning. It doesn't bring comfort. So we lie. We lie with logic, with doctrines, with morality, with science, religion, philosophy, not to know the world, but to endure it. And those lies turn into institutions. They turn into systems of truth. They become dogmas, disguised as knowledge. Nietzsche's not saying we should stop searching for truth. He's saying we should be honest about what we're really doing. We're building interpretations. We're creating languages to deal with the unspeakable. And many times, we're using truth as a form of power. Because truth, as it's usually taught, doesn't set you free. It controls you. It tells you what's right, what's wrong, what's allowed, what's forbidden, what exists, what's insanity. But who decided that? Nietzsche invites us to ask, who benefits from this truth? Does it make you stronger or weaker? Does it set you free or make you tame? For him, truth only has value if it's born from life, if it comes from experience, from the body, from instinct, from real pain, not from cold abstractions, but from the fire that transforms. That's why he says the real philosopher isn't the one chasing eternal truths, but the one strong enough to live without them, the one who creates temporary meanings, knowing they're just constructions, the one who doesn't hide behind absolute concepts, the one who knows truth is fragile and still carries it with dignity. Nietzsche wants you to think with your body, to feel truth as something alive, raw, always changing, and to never again accept a truth that hasn't been lived. Because in the end, the most dangerous truth is the one nobody questions anymore, the one so normalized we forget it was ever an invention. And that's exactly where the power of convenient illusions lives. They keep us comfortable. They make us believe everything's under control, but they pull us away from real life. Nietzsche wants the opposite. Truths that burn, that shake you, that force you to rebuild yourself. even if, for that to happen, you need to destroy everything you once called truth. Zarathustra comes down from the mountain. After 10 years of solitude, meditation, and silence, he returns to the world with something to say. But what he brings isn't a new religion. It's not a better morality or a formula for happiness. Zarathustra brings something dangerous, a truth that doesn't comfort, a message that demands courage, destruction, and rebirth. And that's exactly why no one listens. Like every true prophet, Zarathustra is rejected. Nietzsche knew his message wasn't for everyone. Thus Spoke Zarathustra isn't light reading. It's not clear, not simple, not made to teach. It's a book for the rare few, for those who already feel there's something rotten in the world's values, for those who sense that life demands more than obedience and comfort. Zarathustra speaks like someone trying to wake the dead, but the dead don't want to wake up. He announces the death of God, the collapse of eternal truths, the fall of absolute values. But he also announces something even more disturbing. Zarathustra says, "Man is a rope stretched between the animal and the overman, a rope over an abyss." In other words, you're not ready. You're in transition. You haven't yet become what you can be. But no one wants to hear that. It's easier to be good in the way we were taught. Easier to follow the rules, play the roles, repeat the beliefs. Zarathustra doesn't speak to people looking for comfort. He speaks to those ready to break from it all, from traditional morality, from passive virtue, from inherited guilt, from the fear of chaos. Zarathustra descends the mountain as a new kind of prophet, not one who brings salvation, but one who brings liberation, and with it, responsibility. He doesn't promise paradise. He doesn't point to a god. He says, "Become who you are." That phrase, simple on the surface, is an existential thunderclap. It means stop waiting for meaning from outside. Stop hiding behind doctrines. Stop looking for someone to tell you what to do. You are your own project, your own destiny, your own challenge. Zarathustra calls humanity to greatness, and that's why he terrifies people. Nietzsche knew this voice would be misunderstood. Zarathustra speaks to the crowd with passion, with poetry, with urgency, and he's mocked, ignored, turned into entertainment. They don't understand. They can't understand, because Zarathustra doesn't speak to the mind. He speaks to the tragic soul, to those who've already broken inside, to those who feel that living deeply matters more than being right, more than being accepted. And so, he walks alone. Nietzsche makes Zarathustra a symbol of the thinker who lives at the edge. He no longer belongs to the old world, but the new world doesn't understand him yet. He's an exile between two eras, between two ways of being. He's not a teacher, he's a provoker. Zarathustra's wisdom doesn't fit into systems. It burns, it dismantles, it demands that you let go even of the idea of having a master. He says, if you want to follow me, follow yourself. Zarathustra wants you to smash your idols, even the invisible ones, even the ones you cherish because they feel like part of you. Because deep down, you're still carrying the weight of tradition, the weight of broken promises, of truths designed to tame you, of values that teach you to bow your head and call it virtue. Zarathustra comes with a hammer, not out of anger, but to make space. Space for a new way of life. Life as creation, as aesthetic courage, as self-overcoming. But most people don't want that. Most people want the return of the old God. They want certainty. They want absolution. They want salvation without struggle. Zarathustra calls them the last men. Satisfied, small, moral, predictable. People who reject pain, greatness, passion, because all of that threatens their comfort. That's why Zarathustra is a prophet without followers, a teacher who sends his disciples away, a sage who offers no answers, only questions that burn. Nietzsche wrote Zarathustra like he was writing with his own blood. It's a poetic, tragic, visionary work, not a theory, an experience. Reading Zarathustra is taking a risk. It's realizing you might be living in fear, tied down, trapped in dogmas disguised as personal beliefs. wearing cowardice dressed up as morality. Zarathustra calls you to more pain, more clarity, more responsibility, more life. But only the rare ones answer. Everyone else just blinks and goes back to being comfortable. Nietzsche didn't believe in natural evolution. He didn't buy into the idea of automatic progress for humanity. For him, it's not enough to live, grow, and adapt. You have to break, to destroy who you are so you can become who you could be. That's what he called self-overcoming. But don't get it twisted. Self-overcoming isn't about self-improvement. It's not about optimizing your habits or boosting productivity. It's something much deeper, much more painful, and brutally honest. It's a fight against yourself. It's recognizing that you are a battlefield, looking inward and seeing not some fixed identity, but a fragile construction, full of inherited lies, false values, and fears dressed up as caution. Nietzsche knew, the greatest enemy of a human being isn't out there, it's inside. It lives in your comfort zone, in your fixed identity, in the image you've built of yourself and now cling to. He wrote, "You must burn in your own flame. How could you rise anew if you have not first become ashes?" Thus spoke Zarathustra. That's the demand of self-overcoming, to become ashes, to accept that who you are today is not the final version. It's just a stage, and maybe even a trap. Nietzsche rejected the idea of a pure, perfect, unchanging essence. He saw human beings as a process, a tension, a rope stretched over the abyss. Man, he said, is something that must be overcome, not thrown away, but transcended, transformed, reinvented, surpassed by oneself. And that takes courage, because to overcome yourself, you first have to destroy what's comfortable. You'll have to contradict everything you once called truth, tear up your certainties, face your existential addictions, admit that a lot of what you believe didn't come from you, it was placed in you. Nietzsche warned, everything deep loves a mask. You hide, you protect yourself. You build stories about yourself that keep you from changing. But self-overcoming doesn't accept masks. It rips them all off, not to humiliate you, but to set you free. You'll have to kill outdated versions of yourself. You'll have to let certain parts of you die so that others can be born. Nietzsche saw life as a creative process, but to create, you must destroy. Creating yourself means embracing the chaos of not knowing who you are for a while. It's in that uncertain, unstable, risky space that self-overcoming happens. That's why, for Nietzsche, the true philosopher isn't just a thinker in a library. He's a warrior against his own cowardice. He's the one who, upon recognizing his limitations, refuses to accept them as destiny. The one who, after falling, doesn't stay down, but uses pain as fuel to rise higher. Self-overcoming is both an aesthetic and tragic act. You shape yourself like a work of art, a sculpture that requires cuts, risks, failures, and rebuilding. There's no formula, no script, no final version. Nietzsche wanted human beings to be in a constant state of creation, not living to preserve themselves, but to expand. And that expansion doesn't happen without pain. Because self-overcoming is violent. You'll confront your most intimate fears. You'll realize how trapped you still are by moralities that don't serve you. You'll have to abandon the certainties that once kept you safe. But Nietzsche reminds us, pain is part of transformation. He wrote, "Do you want to live comfortably or intensely? Do you want a light soul or a deep one?" The gay science. Most people want comfort. They want to maintain themselves. They want to stay the same, just with less suffering. Nietzsche had nothing but contempt for that. He wanted people who say yes to the challenge of becoming someone new, who aren't afraid to fail, but are terrified of becoming stagnant. Self-overcoming is incompatible with conformity. It doesn't fit the mold of the good citizen, the rule follower who's never dared to challenge their teachers, the moralist who's never faced their own shadows. Nietzsche wrote, He who cannot obey himself will be commanded. Thus spoke Zarathustra. To obey yourself doesn't mean following impulses. It means building a new path from what you truly are, not from what others expect you to be. And that's rare, because self-overcoming isn't about beating others. It's about conquering your smaller, bitter, resigned self. Nietzsche saw resentment as poison for the soul, and self-overcoming as the antidote. The one who overcomes himself doesn't blame the world, doesn't wait for justice, doesn't live for applause. He creates new values from within, and that's why Nietzsche called him a free spirit. Someone who doesn't ask for permission to become more. Someone who, in the face of their own weakness, doesn't retreat, but moves forward. Who breaks, rebuilds, and keeps going. Nietzsche believed that humanity only has a future if it learns to produce people like this. Beings who won't settle, who won't repeat themselves, who aren't defined by dogmas, but by continuous transformation. Because the meaning of life isn't in finding something fixed, but in becoming what doesn't yet exist. And that process never ends. Nietzsche didn't write treatises. He didn't build systems. He wasn't trying to create philosophical cathedrals. He chose the aphorism. And it wasn't about style. It was about war. Nietzsche wrote like someone attacking, like someone throwing a blade. Short, fast, precise. Not to convince with logic, but to wound certainties. Each aphorism is like a grenade tossed into the reader's mind. It explodes quickly, leaves fragments. It doesn't explain. It transforms. He knew. Truth, when put into a system, dies. It gets tamed, captured by institutions, frozen by academics, watered down in textbooks. That's why he refused to write like other philosophers. He rejected the traditional, logical, step-by-step style. Because that style deceives. It makes it seem like truth is something you reach little by little with patience, with method, with neutrality. Nietzsche wanted the opposite. He wanted thoughts that hit like lightning, that bite, tear, and disturb. That's why he chose the aphoristic form, the form of the sword, not the shield. Each aphorism is a provocation. It's not a conclusion, not an explanation. It's an invitation to fight. You read it, and something inside you moves, or rebels, or lights up. But you're never the same. Nietzsche wrote, "From the military schools of life, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger." Twilight of the Idols. The line is short, but it holds entire worlds. You can read it in 5 seconds. Or spend your whole life trying to live it. That's the power of the aphorism. It doesn't close a thought, it opens it. Nietzsche didn't want you to understand. He wanted you to feel, to bring the aphorism into your skin and see if it survives, or if you survive it. That's why his books aren't linear. There's no beginning, middle, and end. There are cuts, pulses, cracks. Thought comes in waves, not straight lines. Nietzsche writes the way life actually happens, chaotic, intense, unpredictable. He knew language is tricky, that a well-polished argument can be accepted too easily. And he didn't want to be accepted. He wanted to be challenged, because only someone who fights an idea can truly understand it. Nietzsche wrote, "A thought comes when it wants to, not when I want it to." Beyond good and evil. He didn't believe thought was a technical product. For him, the big ideas are explosions. They invade you, not conclusions you build slowly. And the aphorism is the perfect shape for that. In a treatise, the reader gets comfortable, follows the chapters, trusts the author, waits for a safe conclusion. But with aphorisms, there are no crutches. You're alone with the sentence. It stares back at you and forces you to think for yourself. Nietzsche throws you into the fire and wants to see how you come out. There is no system because life isn't systematic. And if philosophy is supposed to reflect life, it has to accept its chaos. Nietzsche doesn't want to teach you what to think. He wants to train you to think bravely. That's why his writing is a minefield. You might step on a sentence that blows up your values, bump into a paragraph that shatters your beliefs, run into a phrase that wipes out years of conviction. And there's no instruction manual. Reading him is dangerous, because Nietzsche doesn't write to inform, he writes to transform. He says, "I write with blood. He who writes in blood learns that blood is spirit." Thus spoke Zarathustra. Each aphorism is an open wound, its thought bleeding, its experience boiled down to its core. He doesn't want to decorate your mind, he wants to scar your soul. And that can't be done with complicated theories. It's done with phrases that stick in your head and won't leave. Nietzsche knew that in times of intellectual laziness, the more polished a system is, the easier it is to tame, to organize it, to reinterpret it to fit society's comfort zone. So he cuts, he interrupts, he walks away from the straight path. Truth for him is like lightning. Either you're awake or you miss it. Either you let it strike you or you protect yourself and return to the dark. That's what aphorisms are, lightning strikes. You can try to write them down, try to fit them into a system, but you'll find they slip through your fingers. Nietzsche writes for the restless, for those who are tired of clean, tidy speeches, for those who've already felt that truth lives not in order, but in risk. That's why his texts are swords. And every reader has to decide, will you use philosophy as armor or as a blade? Nietzsche makes it clear, the only philosophy that matters is the one that bothers you. And the aphorism is how he guarantees that. There's no time for detours, no time for long explanations. Life is happening, and he wants you to wake up before it's too late. Nietzsche once said, "Those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who couldn't hear the music. If you can hear that music too, if these ideas move you, challenge you, wake something up inside you, then this channel is your place. If this content spoke to you, give the video a like. It really helps get the message out there. Leave a comment below. What hit you the hardest? What are your thoughts after this journey? Let's build this space together. And of course, share it with someone who also needs to hear these uncomfortable truths. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because we still have a long road ahead. More deep dives to take, more illusions to break, more truths to question. Stick around, explore the other videos on the channel, and keep walking this philosophical path with us. After all, as Nietzsche said, becoming who you are isn't a destination, it's a process. See you in the next video. Until then.